All right, guys, this is day one of our, I think it's week two, okay, of our unit one, government of the people. Okay.
Let's get started with a short video. Before we get started, let's revisit our essential question. Reread the question on the board and think about how you might answer it using everything we learned last week.
All right, so the essential question is, why do people participate in government?
Let's get started with a short video about civil rights. Press play. Read. It is my right on pages 12 to 15 in Government for the People.
All right, so in your booklet it says government for the people. Go to page 12, and we're going to read 12 through 15.
Extended Read 1. Remember to annotate as you read.
It is My Right by Harper Larios. Many Americans have worked hard to make sure that all citizens have the same rights. Alice Paul, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and Cesar Chavez were leaders in the fight for rights for all. Alice Paul, it is my right to vote. Before 1920, American women did not have the right to vote. Alice Paul believed that women should be able to vote. She thought women would be good leaders. Alice Paul joined the cause for women's right to vote. Alice Paul went to England and met many suffragists. There were women and men who supported the right of women to vote. Suffragists there marched in the streets and made speeches. Alice Paul admired how they worked to get the vote for women. Back home, Alice Paul pushed American suffragists to be more like those in England. It was time to be bold and speak out for the right to vote. Alice Paul helped organize a parade in Washington, D.C. in 1917. Between 5,000 and 10,000 people from all over the world came to march. They supported American women's right to vote. People filled the city that day. Some were there for the parade. Others were there to watch Woodrow Wilson become President of the United States. Hundreds of thousands of people watched the parade. Many were unhappy about it. They shouted that women should stay home. Marchers were pushed and tripped. More than 100 went to the hospital. The parade was a success, though. It brought attention to the issue of women's right to vote. Alice Paul kept fighting for this cause. She was sent to jail several times, but that didn't stop her. She kept working. A few years later, in 1920, women gained the right to vote.
Alice Paul was photographed in 1920 with a banner that had 36 stars, one star for each state that had passed the 19th Amendment.
Rosa Parks. It is my right to sit anywhere. After the Civil War, Jim Crow laws kept African Americans from exercising all their rights. Public places were often segregated. For example, at the movies, whites could sit downstairs. African Americans had to sit in the balcony. African Americans could not swim in the same pools or go to the same schools as whites. In many places, African Americans were also kept from voting. Rosa Parks, an African American, tried to register to vote in Alabama twice. She had the right to vote, but was turned down both times. Together with many others, Rosa Parks worked to change Jim Crow and other unfair laws. On December 1, 1955, Rosa Parks boarded a city bus in Montgomery, Alabama. She was going home from work. The first 10 seats of the bus were for white passengers only. Rosa Parks sat behind those seats, in a seat for African Americans. Soon the bus was full. A white man got on. The bus driver told Rosa Parks to give her seat to the man. She politely refused to move, so the bus driver called the police. Rosa Parks was arrested because she didn't do what the driver told her to do.
Time to respond. Press Escape to exit present mode. Then double-click in each box to start typing. Okay, it's your turn. Read the directions on the board, and this time try it on your own.
All right, you ready? Oops. So we did this one. So she said to do this one right here. All right. So it says Rosa Parks. It is my right to sit anywhere. So let's see. We're just underlining important key details, right? And that's it. So after Civil War, Jim Crow laws kept African Americans from exercising all their rights. Public places were often segregated. For example, at the movies, whites could sit downstairs. African Americans had to sit in the balcony. African Americans could not swim in the same pools or go to the same schools as whites. In many places, African Americans were kept from voting. Okay. So you could say that Jim Crow laws kept African Americans from exercising all their rights. Because the rest of the paragraph they're just giving you examples of what those are. All right, let's move on. Oops. It says Rosa Parks, an African American, tried to register to vote in Alabama twice. She had the right to vote, but was turned down both times. Together with many others, Rosa Parks worked to change the Jim Crow and other unfair laws. Okay. Here on December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks boarded a city bus in Montgomery, Alabama. She was going home from work. The first 10 seats of the bus were for white passengers only. Rosa Parks sat behind those seats. Rosa Parks sat behind those seats in a seat for African Americans. Soon the bus was full. A white man got on. Okay. So the bus driver told Rosa Parks to give her seat to the man. She politely refused to move, so the bus driver called the police. Rosa Parks was arrested because she didn't do what the driver told her to do. Okay. So there. So the bus driver told Rosa Parks to give her seat to the man, and she politely refused. So the bus driver called the police, and she was arrested. Okay. And she worked to change the Crow laws and other unfair laws as well. Paragraph 11 says the police drove her to the police station. Parks didn't know what might happen to her. She was released from jail several hours later. In autobiography, Parks wrote, I had no idea when I refused to give up my seat on the Montgomery bus that my small action would put an end to the segregation laws in the South. So her small action would help put an end to the segregation laws in the South. I only knew that I was tired of being pushed around. I was a regular person just as good as anybody else. All right, we're going to continue, okay? Because we didn't have school on Monday, so we're going to do day 2.
Hello. Let's get started today with a video about Cesar Chavez. Press play. Now read the rest of It Is My Right on pages 16 to 19 in Government for the People.
All right, let's do that.
Martin Luther King Jr. It is my right to speak out. Rosa Parks's actions made many people take action, too. Other women called for a boycott of the Montgomery city buses. They would unite in their fight against Jim Crow laws. They asked people to walk for one day. The bus boycott was a nonviolent protest. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a leader in the African American community, thought the boycott was a good idea. King believed in changing things peacefully. The one-day boycott was a success. The city buses were almost empty. Then Rosa Parks was found guilty of not obeying the law. King became the leader of a group that called for a longer boycott of the city buses. For 381 days, most African Americans refused to ride the Montgomery city buses.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Wright, and Reverend Ralph D. Abernathy, Center, were arrested for their part in the boycott.
When Martin Luther King Jr. spoke, people listened. He talked about how Black Americans and white Americans were treated differently. His words made some people angry. During the bus boycott, someone threw a bomb at his house. King continued to speak out for peaceful change. He took action, too, leading marches and helping people vote. On August 28, 1963, Dr. King gave one of his most important speeches. Standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., he looked out at 250,000 people. They had marched to the nation's capital to ask for more jobs and more freedom. Dr. King spoke about his dreams. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Millions of people also saw the March on Washington speeches on television.
Cesar Chavez. It is my right to organize. Dr. King's words and actions inspired Cesar Chavez. Chavez grew up working in the fields in California. He and his family were migrant workers. They worked long hours and earned very little money. Families moved often to find work. Children could not stay in one school. Cesar Chavez decided to do something to improve farm workers' lives. He started a group called the National Farm Workers Association, NFWA. For several years, Chavez and others traveled across California. They tried to convince farm workers to join their group. People had tried to organize a farm workers group before. Promises had been made that their lives would be better. Those promises had not been kept. Then grape growers in Delano, California, started paying their workers less money. The workers went on strike. They refused to work. Cesar Chavez and the members of the NFWA voted to support the striking farm workers in Delano. The strike went on for several years.
Cesar Chavez. More than 14 million Americans stopped buying grapes to support the striking farm workers. Chavez is applauding the signing of a new farm workers union contract with the grape growers.
Cesar Chavez went on a hunger strike to show his support for the farm workers. He also wanted people to remember that the farm workers were carrying out a peaceful protest. For 25 days, Cesar Chavez didn't eat. The strike in Delano ended in 1969. Workers in the grape fields received more pay and other important rights to protect their health and safety. Alice Paul, Rosa Parks, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Cesar Chavez worked for important causes. They helped change America. Women won the right to vote. African Americans won the right to be treated equally. Farm workers won better working conditions. Today, people continue to fight to make sure everyone has equal rights.
All right, let's go ahead and annotate this. Okay. So here it says, Dr. King's words and actions inspired Cesar Chavez. Cesar Chavez grew up working in the fields in California. He and his family were migrant workers. They worked long hours and earned very little money. Families moved often to find work. Children could not stay in one school. Cesar Chavez decided to do something to improve work lives. So he decided to do something to improve farm workers' lives. Why did he do that? Okay. Because they worked long hours and earned very little money. Okay. All right. And then it says he started a group called National Farm Workers Association. For several years, Chavez and others traveled across California. They tried to convince farm workers to join their group. People had tried to organize a farm workers group before. Promises had been made that their lives would be better. Those promises had not been kept. So he started that group. Okay. It says, then the grape growers in Delano, California started paying their workers less money. The workers went on a strike. They refused to work. I think that's important. Plus, what's a strike? A strike is when people refuse to work for a company. And then here it says Cesar Chavez went on a hunger strike to show his support for the farm workers. He also wanted people to remember that the farm workers were carrying out a peaceful protest. For 25 days, Cesar Chavez didn't eat. The strike in Delano ended in 1969. Workers in the grape fields received more pay and other important rights to protect their health and safety. So he went on a hunger strike. That means he didn't eat. And then as a result, workers received more pay and other important rights to protect their health and safety. It says, explain what Jim Crow laws were. So Jim Crow laws, what they were? Are laws that kept African Americans separate from whites. Says boycott in the Montgomery City buses meant not riding them or using them. And then a hunger strike is when someone refuses to eat for a particular reason. And then Chavez went on a hunger strike because he wanted to show support for the farm workers. There you go.